All right, good evening, everyone. 8 o'clock on our Monday evening. I'm 10 Tampa Bay Chief Meteorologist Bobby Deskins here in Tampa, Florida. And that is Ross Muma up in Jacksonville, WTLV. Good evening, Ross. How are you doing, man?
Good evening, Bobby. I'm doing pretty good. Another week that we're still watching Erin very, very closely. Seems like the storm that just doesn't want to turn and go away, essentially.
Yeah, and just looking at the bigger picture, and, you know, we're all here on the West Coast out on the Gulf, so we don't have any worries with this. But it's starting to, I mean, I think Jacksonville's going to be fine, but it is getting a little bit closer. And now North Carolina is certainly going to have to deal with it a whole lot more than what we were thinking about at first.
Yeah, the Outer Banks now have those tropical storm watches in place, those mandatory evacuations for places like Cape Hatteras and some other communities along the Outer Banks. I think those got put in place this morning, the evacuation orders. So, yeah, I think that at least coastal North Carolina probably has the best chance to see some of the worst conditions from Hurricane Erin. But at least locally here in Jacksonville and also down there in Tampa, it seems like we're scraping by with minimal impacts for the vast majority of folks who live across our areas.
Yeah, Tampa will be fine. You guys will have some swell. You're going to have some rip current risk, and we'll talk all about that tonight. Let's start with the bigger picture. You can see where it is now. It's actually pulling away from Puerto Rico and the Turks and Caicos and kind of the Bahamas. It's still kind of really affecting the central and southern Bahamas and the Turks and Caicos, although things are getting better, I think, overnight tonight. Ross, we just got the 8 p.m. numbers in. I went ahead and measured it as well. The numbers for 8 o'clock still 130, well, I shouldn't say still, I should say down to 130 mile per hour winds. The pressure went up to 947, so it was much weaker. Well, it's not a weak system, but weaker than what it was. It was 140. The pressure, I think, was 936 or something like that. So it definitely came in a little bit weaker. It's moving now to the northwest at 10. And Ross, that wasn't the case earlier. It was moving west-northwest, and we don't want to see that.
Yeah, no, we want more of that northerly direction sooner rather than later, not only for the folks, you know, who live down across the Bahamas, but especially for everyone up and down the east coast of Florida and into Georgia as well, because the closer this thing gets, more than likely, the more powerful a lot of those, you know, long period swells are going to be tomorrow, Wednesday, Thursday, meaning, you know, the larger breakers and overall just surf conditions that we're going to feel locally across the east coast here. And the rip current risk certainly not going to be improving whatsoever at all the closer the storm gets. So I think that is at least a good sign that the storm has dropped a little bit with overall sustained wind speeds and with the overall pressure. And I talked a little bit with some of our meteorologists earlier today, Bobby, about how over the weekend, especially on Saturday, right, when it became that Category 5 storm, if you looked at the actual wind field, I mean, those hurricane force winds were like a pin
45 miles
inside of the overall storm. Yeah, inside of the whole storm complex, right? And even the tropical storm force winds really didn't expand out that far. But more often than not, you know, once it intensifies that far, the centrifugal force, it can't keep it spinning at the center that long. It's got to push that energy outward. And that's kind of what we've seen here over the past 24 or 48 hours, right? The storm has expanded overall. We saw it decrease in intensity a little bit yesterday, and I think that's kind of what we're seeing here now as well, right? The storm continuing to expand and grow overall with square mileage, so to speak, but you know, not continuing to necessarily deepen and strengthen like we did at least at the start of the weekend.
Yeah, and in fact, Ross, to your point, the very fact that we see those inner winds, the higher winds that were 140 at 5 o'clock, now down to 130 at 8 o'clock, that is a sign that it's weakening a little bit. And when it does that, it spreads out, as you were saying. So, yeah, it literally, the wind field is actually growing as we speak. Recon's out there right now. They're kind of shifting where they're from. We've got our NOAA weather hurricane hunters, Miss Piggy and Kermit. They're back, I think, at least one of them, but I think they're all back now to Lakeland. They're down here out of Lakeland Linder Airport. Here's the latest forecast track. This is the one that came out at 5 o'clock today. We'll get another update on the track at 11 p.m. this evening. And Ross, you're right. Here it is. Here's 1:30 tomorrow afternoon, which is where we're at now. It may even be a little bit lower than that because they weren't forecasting this drop that we had right now. 1:20 by late tomorrow night into Wednesday morning. Wednesday afternoon is 1:15. Thursday afternoon is 1:10. almost due east of Cape Hatteras at that point. But you see, hopefully it's starting to make that turn a little bit more. And really, there's also going to be some shear in here, and especially up in here. The shear goes something like this. So it's going to start to get some shear in here in the next, I'd say, 36 hours or so. And then once it gets up here, you can see the turn really starts, and that's going to be sheared apart. So there's actually going to be a bunch of clouds that get shot over here. But it's still going to be actually a larger storm by that particular time. Couple things to notice on here. The forecast models have been shifting, and these are the global models, and you can see the red ones there. You know, I did some digging today, Ross. Guess which model has been the most accurate thus far for location? Pick one.
If we're just going, long-range global models, I'm going to say the European, at least in contrast to the GFS. If we're just comparing those two,
right.
The European's been in line with that Western tracker through most of last week, really. So, did I get close?
The European it did beat the GFS. The UK Met. And I don't mean by a little bit.
Okay.
By a lot. It has been much better than the other models on location. This particular version of the UK Met doesn't do intensity, but that's okay. We're just looking at location. But guess what these lines right here are on the western side? Those are the part of the UK Met that are coming out. And they're further west than the main look at it. So does this come even further west? I mean, it certainly can. And going back and looking at the track record of this particular storm, those models on that one, the UK Met's been the best. It changed the watches in the warnings now, because we had that at, all day, like probably 24 hours, we've had something similar to this. Turks and Caicos, tropical storm warning. The yellow that you see there, the central Bahamas, that's a tropical storm watch. So you're talking winds about 40 to 60 miles per hour, maybe some higher gusts, if that. I think it's closer to 40s. But the watches go up to the central Bahamas, not even 100% sure that they'll get those winds, and that's actually what's happening right now. They're trying to get those winds now if they're going to, and then it moves by. But, Ross, this is new. You can walk people through this one. This is the Carolina coast.
Yeah, this came out with a 5 p.m. advisory, right? So this includes, Duck, Carolina, Cape Hatteras, down to the north sides of Wilmington, New Bern. I know you're from this area. You at least lived up there for a portion of time. Yeah, now you're giving me some assistance. Oh, okay, so I've been to Topsail Island. So, yeah, north sides of Topsail Beach. Jacksonville, North Carolina.
Camp Lejeune.
Morehead City. I mean, these are some pretty...
That's all our
Camp
Lejeune's
there you
all the Marines. The Marines coming out of Camp Lejeune in the Jacksonville area right there near Sneed's Ferry.
Yeah, I mean, so all of these places currently included in the tropical storm watch, and of course, as I had mentioned earlier, the mandatory evacuations I think were just for the outer islands. You can correct me if I'm wrong, Bobby. I'm not sure how far inland some of those went, but you mentioned, I know, a couple times last week about some of the inlets and that consistent or persistent northeast wind or easterly wind kind of backing things up and feeding up into some of those, bays and things of that nature. Certainly could cause some, at the very least, some minor coastal flooding.
Yeah.
For some of those areas and communities.
Oh, and they, look, they get a good nor'easter and they have those flooding issues. And initially, if you looked at some of the modeling, the winds where I drew those arrows, those northeast winds, were 15 miles per hour, if that. Now they're jumping to 25 to 30, and you're probably going to get some 40s and 50s, probably some 50s out there at Cape Hatteras. It starts out of the northeast, then it goes to the north, and then the northwest. And on top of that, you've got all this surf. So not only are you going to get 40, 50 mile per hour winds out of the northeast, which is going to be that what we call longshore current going kind of parallel to the coastline. So it takes the sand from up here and drags it down to here. But now you've also got large surf picking that sand up too. So we always see this, and we're going to see it. NC 12, Highway 12 there. You can go, anytime you go over there, you'll notice it because you'll see brand new pavement. Because it's so close, and there's nothing to the right of you if you're going northbound. It's literally a sand dune that they use a bulldozer to do in the ocean. And then that will get washed out. That part of the road will likely get washed out, and that's almost typical for them. This, I think, is going to be a pretty good one for them, and especially something that they weren't necessarily thinking was going to be too bad. And the center is going to be 100, 150 miles offshore.
Yeah, I think that's the incredible thing, right? I mean, even for us locally here in Jacksonville, we've been trying to tell folks, it's the center of Erin is still going to be over 300 miles offshore to our east. Nonetheless, we're still going to experience not only the dangerous rip currents, but just as large of surf that we are going to get. It's kind of hard for some people to wrap their minds around. It makes them think the storm's going to be a lot closer than it actually will be. Now, for those folks up in North Carolina, they could see some outer bands, so wouldn't be surprised if they actually get some rain and things of that nature. And you mentioned, the winds 40 to 50 miles per hour certainly looks like that's a little bit more probable than at least what it did at the end of last week. So, certainly folks in North Carolina need to be on high alert.
I've got some friends that are in Swansboro own a marina there, so I always keep them updated every time there's a storm coming through. And last week it was like, oh, you're fine, you're looking good. Now it's like, well, okay. I mean, they're still good, I think, but, instead of 15 knots, now they're talking 25 to 30 knots with some higher gusts. So Ross,
well, you probably have friends everywhere, Bobby, right?
No. But that's my old stomping grounds. You know that. I better have some there at least. So this is the center track from the National Hurricane Center. All right, so we take the actual center line, which we don't show you on TV when we show you the cone, because we don't want you focusing on that line to think that that's where it's going to go. The cone is saying the center on average will go anywhere in that cone, and that's just the center of the storm. That's not the wind and the rain and everything associated with it, right? So what we've done, we've tracked I'm showing you the last 10 forecasts on this storm from the Hurricane Center, and I color-coded it. So the light colors are the oldest. The dark colors, like this black in here, is the latest, except for the red is the very latest. All right? And so this went back to last Friday night. You see this white right here? That was last Friday night. And the Hurricane Center doesn't make big changes, right? But Friday night, early Saturday morning, they had it here, then they went here, then they went here, then they went here, then they went here, then they actually jumped back over here, and then they went over here. So it's basically been moving west all weekend long. And the 5 o'clock track that we got today is this red line. That's pretty much what we had earlier today, but that is the furthest west that they've had this thing. So, I guess I can measure this. Let's see. So from Hatteras out about 200 miles, and that would be to the center. I mean, what are the odds that it comes further west?
I certainly wouldn't rule it out of the scenario or the question yet. Certainly that's been the track or the pattern here over the past 4 or 5 days, a slightly more westward track, and we've kind of noticed that right over the weekend. It was wobbling a little bit back and forth. I saw a lot of folks on social media almost kind of like freaking out or panicking to a certain extent. Of course, you want to watch kind of the pattern of the track over several hours rather than just slight wobbles here, an hour here or an hour there. But it kind of has taken its good old time moving westward. Kind of seems a bit reluctant to begin more of that northerly, north-northwest turn, eventually to the north and then to the northeast by next week. And you're showing right here where some of those kind of wobbles were in the forecast over the weekend.
Yeah, when storms get strong, they tend to do that. They tend to wobble. And I'll admit, especially when they're weaker storms, I like to put the center line when we're looking at radar of a storm that's right offshore. I like to put the center line out there because then I can see if it's coming on or off that radar. And usually we're doing that, unfortunately, when it's getting really close to us. Obviously, it's within radar sight. But you have to know about those wobbles, right? And you got to determine if that's a wobble or if it's going offshore. These have been pretty good wobbles, but this thing was Cat 5. Right? Upper Cat 4 at one point, so it was going to wobble either way you look at it. But then it started just going a little bit further to the west. This was earlier today. It was going west-northwest at around 10 to 15 knots today. So it was like, oh no, we don't want that. We don't want that. All right, let's talk. Here's another really cool one that we've been doing. This is for the entire lifespan. This is all of the forecast cones that the National Hurricane Center has issued for it. And you can see the shift in these as well. It was supposed to come a little to the west. And it's kind of a little misleading because the end of each cone is wider, of course. But look where that last cone is compared to where all the others. So it's definitely shifting everything. And in fact, if you look, it was thinking it was going to curve a little bit sooner way out here. So yeah, let's hope.
What does that make you think about some of the forecast models that we were looking at then through most of last week? For example, and I mentioned this before, if you just look at your main two, Don't even think about the hurricane model, so to speak. The GFS had this thing turning pretty close to Bermuda, and then the European took it much further westward. Kind of what do we think? How did they perform, so to speak, with this, at least up to this point?
Well, great question, and I'm going to take you back out to the end of this. I'll take you right up here, actually. Let's do this. You're absolutely right. The GFS was, where's Bermuda? Bermuda is somewhere about right in here. All right, the GFS was something like this, and look where we are. All right, and it's something like this. And in fact, this is Bermuda over here. Over the weekend, it was kind of splitting it. It was kind of right in the middle, and it's not even that now. Now it's much closer. The European did a little bit of flip-flopping, but not a lot. And Ross, just our everyday forecasting that we do, something is wrong with the GFS. It gets it every now and then, but it's not like it used to be. And the European, usually, we kind of rely on the European a little bit more anyways, a little bit more accurate. But the GFS has been just doing some crazy stuff. And then we come up, I'm talking 9-10 months worth of this, right? And then we come up to hurricane season, and now it always does its GFS-a-cane at the end, and everybody posts those on the internet. So now it's June, and here we are having to tell everybody, no, don't worry. Here we are having to tell the people in Tampa that after having 3 hurricanes last year, one with 5 to 8 foot storm surge that we hadn't seen in 120 years, right? So 103 years. So to have that model doing what it's doing, it's hard to look at the forecast that it has now and put a whole lot of weight in it, but it's not always wrong. I mean, this one was curving to the east, and the Hurricane Center thought so too. They had their cone out there. Here's where it thinks now. The green lines are the GFS, or the Euro, excuse me, and the white lines are the GFS, whitish, yellowish. And look at this. This is Wednesday morning, 10 a.m. That's pretty good agreement for those two. And not only where it's at, but the size. I mean, look at the size of that thing.
And then can you play it out further than that?
Yep.
There we go. Wow, that's honestly still in pretty close agreement through Thursday morning.
Yeah, I mean, that just doesn't happen. 6 a.m. Thursday. There's Bermuda, by the way. I mean, what's the difference here? Hatteras to Bermuda is 643 miles. I'm sorry, let me try this again. That's about 200 miles out. So it's way less than half the distance to Bermuda. All right, and that's actually pretty good agreement. We'll get another European coming in here soon. So I would tell you this, Ross, that means that the GFS has come further west on the latest run this afternoon.
Yep.
And then they're out to sea.
Which, I mean, you like to see them at least in agreement. Certainly not good news for North Carolina, but...
Yeah. And it's not on shore. It's not on shore, right? So that's good news, but it is definitely closer. Here are the Euro ensembles, right? And now I'll throw up the GFS ensembles. Now let's put them up together. It's going to go too fast
Not too dissimilar, really. Yeah.
Yeah. Let me get it right. There you go, together. And really, what to notice here is these are the ensemble runs, but the Euro was a little bit to the west, not much. And I think some of these GFS runs are going to come in and be popping over there too. So, that's close. By the way, there's Bermuda. It's hard to see. It's way out there. All right, so let's talk a little bit about those winds, Ross. This is one of my favorite graphics. The Hurricane Center does a whole lot of testing and asking citizens, hey, what do you understand what this means? If I show you this, what does that mean? And they do all this, what's called basically social science testing to figure out how they can make better maps, how we, Ross and I, can communicate with folks at home to get them to understand the forecast and really understand the uncertainty in the forecast when you're talking hurricanes too, because nothing's 100% at this point. But this one right here, of all the things that we show pressures and we show winds and we show all this stuff, this one just says, hey, you've got about a 30 to 40% chance of seeing at least 40-mile-per-hour winds by Wednesday at 8 p.m., right? You don't need to know anything else except for storm surge, and we would tell you about that. But, that just needs to know, okay, because, Russ, you and I don't know what everybody's doing out there. They all have their own lives, their own things. So we need to help them time-wise. Work this out so that they can plan in their mind. I mean, I know my wife, I'm like, the honeydew list. I'm like, just write it down. Write it down, because I know I got to take 3 trips to the hardware store because I'll forget something. So I need to plan out how much time it makes me to do that. This right here, I think personally is one of the best ones because that helps people.
Yeah, and I mean, really no big surprises for North Carolina either, with regards at least to the percentage of the probability, right? Yep. You know, I think they increased it perhaps a hair in the latest map. But yeah, timing-wise, I mean, it's going to be Wednesday evening. I think perhaps the most interesting part to me, and that's just because I'm from the Northeast, is you look up towards Ocean City, Maryland, the south sides of Delaware, and even up towards New England, you know, Cape Cod even, Nantucket. That's perhaps the more interesting, you know, part of this for some of those areas that you might not ever even think about, you know, having to deal with the hurricane tropical storm force winds, although it's still a very low chance, only 10% chance there for Cape Cod. It just shows, you know, not only the magnitude of the storm, but how far-reaching the storm's impacts could be felt, all the way from, you know, the coast of Florida, the whole way up to the Mid-Atlantic, and perhaps even, you know, the New England states, Canada, Nova Scotia, Newfoundland could feel impacts by the end of the week and into the start of the weekend. So, and this also just shows how expansive the Windfield is going to become, or already kind of is, right, Bobby?
Yeah.
But it's going to continue to grow and expand outward here over the next couple of days.
So walk us through this, and you can see the time there. I'm going to advance this. And let me do this first before we do it. Let me put a measure on here so we can kind of get an idea. So right now, tropical storm force winds about 420, and then you've got, sorry about this, and then you got hurricane force winds about 110, okay? 420 and 110. All right, so now let me run this out in time. Let's go out to, I'm just going to get it up towards the Carolinas because that's more important, right? Thursday, 2 a.m. Put a little timer here.
Yeah, I mean, that looks like it's already expanded a lot. Perhaps the hurricane force winds themselves may not be as strong overall, but the field itself.
So yeah, so now you went from 420 to 520, and from 100 to 175. So it went from 420 miles wide to 520 miles wide by the time we get towards late Wednesday night, just because that wind field, what's happening here, folks, is the wind here in the center is coming down. Sorry about that. Right there in the center is coming down, because that's where you see those high. I mean, 130 is what it's at right now, right? That's a real small area, probably right here on the north and northeast side of it. But when that starts to weaken, it comes down, but as you were saying, that centrifugal force spreads out the wind, and that's why it's getting larger. And the closer that this track ends up getting to the Carolinas, the more they're getting brushed by this. And so that is Thursday morning. There's Thursday around lunchtime. That's Thursday at 4 p.m. And then, Ross, look at your Ocean City, Maryland, Jersey Shore. Those winds stay offshore.
Yeah, so breezy for those folks, but not looking at the tropical storm force or gale force winds more than likely.
Yeah, and what they will get, though, is the surf. And this is what we've been talking about. This is the threat even for Jacksonville. I haven't looked at the cams today, but I assume the surf is starting to come up now. I know the swells are picking up. The swell period is picking up.
Yeah, we've noticed a little bit of an uptick today. Our waves are anywhere from about 3 to 4 feet, or probably closer to 4 feet as of about 5 or 6 o'clock here this evening. And you can see it on the cameras. Yeah, the breakers are a little bit larger and bigger, but certainly by tomorrow, we're expecting anywhere from 4 to 6 foot waves, and even more so than that by Wednesday.
That's Wednesday morning, as you can see there. Now, you've been hearing 100-foot waves on the internet. Maybe you have, maybe you haven't. But look, this is 45 to 50 something out here, okay, which is huge. Don't get me wrong. But the rogue waves, I mean, you would get a rogue wave, which means a couple waves, 2 or 3, get together at the same time, and it's just randomly happened. Then you could get a 100-foot wave. Most of it's not going to be that, okay? Most of this is going to be 40s, a couple 50s out there. But closer to home, that's what we're worried about, right? And all of this is literally throwing water up against the coast. So we talk about storm surge. Even if the storm is not going on shore, it's still pushing water. I mean, our storm surge was 5 to 8 feet here in the Tampa Bay area last year with a 100-mile storm, 100 miles offshore. And it was Cat 3, something like that, when it went by. So it's about pushing water. The East Coast can handle much more surge than here in Tampa Bay. We're kind of like the problem child for the Hurricane Center. They use this as even a guinea pig kind of when they do mock drills because they know how bad it is here. So it's not as terrible there, but it's going to be an issue. I've already seen one story about a rip current. I don't know if they died, but there's, you know, it's weird, but unfortunately there's going to be issues like that over the next week up and down the coastline. So this is 11 a.m. Let's go back out. This is tomorrow morning around 7 a.m. Surf's just coming up. Hey, Ross, you think Tim Deegan will be up early tomorrow?
I guarantee you he definitely was this morning. Tomorrow, I don't know. He told me his old bones can't take the big waves as well as they used to in his younger years.
Yeah, well, it's hard to duck dive a longboard. I know. I know. You know, the older you get, the longboards are nice, man. I just love those things. Just, you know, a few paddles and get up and just take your time. No, I call the shortboards, when I take my shortboard out, it's butt wiggling. And I'm getting a little too old to butt wiggle. I like those longboards. Yeah. He's right. He's right. But look at this swell coming in, and I'll back it up just a little bit here. You can see what happens there in North Carolina. They're going to get the brunt of it. So that's it. Now, Ross, real fast, we do want to talk about this. We've got about a minute left. And I don't want to put a lot into this, but have you been watching this one here? What's your thoughts?
I think a tropical depression is probably possible by the end of the week. You know, Fernand is the next name on the list. I think after that, it's a lot still up in the air. I do think there's going to be a trough that probably sets up over the eastern third of the country that could perhaps try to, you know, steer it back off to the northeast and make it recurve. But I think there's still a lot of inconsistency left and a lot to be desired within some of the long-range modeling.
Here it is here.
And trying to figure out where this goes.
On the European, here it is here. It's recurving behind Erin. The GFS says it does turn to the west, so we'll keep an eye on it. Don't worry about it yet.